This video lesson is going to focus on plotting fractions and decimals on the same number line. You can see that I've drawn a number line with 10 equal parts. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Each part is marked with a decimal increment. 1/10, 2/10, 3/10, 4/10, 5/10, and so on, all the way to 10/10, which would be 1. Okay, now you can see that I've got some fractions that we're going to plot, as well as some decimals. Let's go ahead and begin with the 3/10. Now previously, I made a video lesson on converting fractions to decimals. And that's basically what you're going to be doing. You're going to be dividing the numerator by the denominator to get your decimal equivalent. But sometimes the fractions given are pretty easy, and you'll be able to see what it's going to be without actually going through the math. So whenever you have a denominator that's a 10, this numerator is going to tell you how many tenths you have. So you can see right here 3/10. And if you listen to the way I'm saying it, 3/10 as a fraction, that's how you say it as a decimal, 3/10. So our point is going to be on that 3/10 mark. The next fraction is 1/2. Now 1/2 is going to represent half of the whole. And if you know that your ruler or your number line is broken up into a certain number of increments, for instance, we're going from 0 to 1 or 0 to 10/10, then halfway is going to be 5/10. But if you're not sure, what you want to do is divide the 1 by the 2, and then you'll get 0.5, or 0.0, or 0.5, excuse me. Let's look at these, and I'll actually do the math for the 2/3, the 3/4, and the 5/6, just so that you can see how to do that if you need a little review. I'm going to zoom in, and then I'll zoom back out when it's time to plot. Okay, so 2/3 is going to be rewritten as 2 divided by 3. Now, 3 doesn't go into 2, so we can put a 0 up here. We're going to add a decimal point and a 0. Now we can ask ourselves, how many times does 3 go into 20? It goes into 20 6 times. 6 times 3 is 18. And when we subtract, we get 2 again. Now notice we started with a 2. And if we were to add another 0, and I'll go ahead and do that, and bring that down, we get 20. And we already dealt with 20. 3 goes into 20 6 times. And we're just going to keep getting 2s. Okay, so this is a repeating decimal. The 6 is going to continue to repeat. Now, the reason I went out 2 places, so this is going to keep going. The reason I went out 2 places because I wanted to specify that on the number line, it's going to be different than 6/10. So let's zoom out again. Okay, so here you can see the point of 6/10. Notice this is slightly bigger than 6/10. To say this as a decimal, we're going to say 66 hundredths. 6/10 is the same thing as 60 hundredths. And 7/10 is the same thing as, or equivalent to, 70 hundredths. So this 2/3 is going to be between 60 hundredths and 70 hundredths. Halfway would be 65 hundredths. So we want to go just hundredths more. So I'm just going to eyeball it here. And I'll go ahead and mark it with the red so you can see a little better. Okay, so that'd be where 2/3 would be. Let's look at 3/4, and maybe you could do this one on your own. Write it out, stop the video, and see if you can solve it. I'll go ahead and do the math just in case. 4 doesn't go into 3. 4 goes into 37 times. That's going to be 28. Bring down the 2, add another 0. 4 does go into 25 times evenly, so I'm not going to have any left over, so I can stop here. So again, like the last one, I'm dealing with hundredths. This is 75 hundredths. So that's going to be between the 70 hundredths and the 80 hundredths, exactly halfway. So again, I'll use the red. Now, the last one is 5/6. 5/6. So 5 divided by 6. 6 does not go into 5 evenly. Add a decimal and a 0. 6 goes into 58 times. That's going to be 48. Subtract, I get 2. I need to add another 0. And 6 goes into 23 times. Hey, I think we're going to have a similar thing here. It's just in the reverse. We get 18. Guess what? I get a 2 again. So this 3 is going to keep going. Let me zoom in there so you can see it. So that 3 is just going to keep going. So if I were to round to the nearest hundredths place, that decimal would be 83 hundredths. So again, on the number line, it's going to be between 80 hundredths and 90 hundredths. It's going to be closer to the 80 because the 3 is less than 5. So if this were halfway, I'm going to go in, and that would be my 83 hundredths. Okay, now let's look at the decimals. And the first decimal is 2/10. Well, that's pretty easy to find because my 2/10 is right here. So I'll go ahead and mark that. Then we have 45 hundredths. This is going to be 40 hundredths. This will be 50 hundredths. 45 is exactly in the middle of those two, and that would be 45 hundredths. The last one is 9 thousandths. Now, the previous ones, they were either a tenth or a hundredths. If we add another 0 to these numbers, we would go out to the thousandths. But notice this is not 900 thousandths. So it's not over here where it would be 0.900. That's not what this number is. This is telling me that I have 9 out of 1,000. So what I want to do is look at the first digit past the decimal point. It's a 0. So this number is going to be plotted between the 0 and the 100 thousandths. So 0.000 to 0.100 or 100 thousandths. It's going to be between. So if I were to break up this section right here, I'll zoom in even more, but I'm not going to be drawing those little marks. If I were to draw 100, if I divided this up into 100 spaces, where would that 9 fall? So maybe you could visualize or imagine where that might be. It's going to be really close to that 0. So I'm just going to go ahead and put a little tick mark there. I'm sure it's even closer than that, but right now, that's what we're going to say.